Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we are so excited to have Kelly Walker joining us. So welcome to the podcast, Kelly.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to discussing your creative journey, studio space, entrepreneurial business initiatives, of which there are many, as well as recording a bonus segment towards the end about cultivating a collector base. And we will be sharing that with our podcast supporters at levelupartist.com.
But before we go ahead and dive in, let's share a little bit more about your background for our listeners who may not be familiar with your work quite yet. Kelly Walker is a self-taught artist who continues to study in the School of Life. She found her way to Baltimore, Maryland at the age of 18, where she has lived ever since. Kelly absorbs the beauty, chaos, and reality of Baltimore City and channels it into her work. Kelly's artwork has been featured extensively at venues both in and outside of Baltimore area, including several galleries in Los Angeles and the Delaware Museum of Art.
So cool. And that is, of course, the formal introduction. But Kelly, how would you describe your work to someone who's never seen it before, keeping in mind that most of the Level Up Artist podcast listeners might be in their car, might not be able to see the links to your work yet?
Gotcha. I like the description that I'm a rainbow tornado.
I love that.
My work is really, it's very organic. I'm a very restless spirit. And I work in many different mediums and many different series. A lot of color, always color and energy. A lot of confidence. I feel like my work has a lot of, they're all, the works I end up making are statement pieces, large, colorful, bold, brave. So yeah, a lot of color, a lot of texture, a lot of dimension, a lot of hustle in them. A lot of, you can kind of feel my, sometimes like you can pick up a painting of mine and it weighs like 20 pounds because I've painted over it like 6 times. And so, I'm really a fan of happy accidents and like an organic kind of energetic experience when I'm working. So that that definitely comes through in the work.
Nice. I love that. Can definitely relate to the many, many layers upon layers upon. Sometimes it takes the 7th painting to finally be the one. So I can completely understand. And I'm really glad, speaking of layering paintings upon paintings, we met you at a show that you did with a fellow Baltimore artist, based artist, Rosola. And you had an exhibition preview, which was interesting because a lot of times exhibitions open on first Friday, but yours was actually on a Thursday, which was fantastic because then we actually had a chance to talk to you. Usually we would be in our studios, of course, trying to talk to potential collectors of our own work, but by doing it a day early, we could mingle with you and get to know you a little bit better. And then, of course, the folks that actually came to see you. But it was really cool because you had these pieces, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong in my description, but they looked like you had painted over other paintings. And then on top of that, one of your pieces was an actual mural you did in the space. Technically a temporary mural because I would get painted over later on. Unless you did wallpaper. You did it straight on the wall, right?
Right on the wall. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really cool to see that, what do you call it? That contrast between this is like fresh work and this is work that has a different message that's getting like spray painted, or it looked like you had done some strokes. It almost looked like, nope, you're denied. Like you're going to turn into something else.
That's right. My poor assistant, I swear, like when I have a really good weekend, I'll finish a piece. If I don't love a piece, sometimes I'll like put gold leaf on it or I'll frame it. There's a couple tricks that I do. And like, if I'm not completely satisfied with the piece, and a lot of times it'll get all the way to framed, photographed on the website, and I'm just not okay with it for whatever reason. There's just something not right. And I literally like send her a list, and every Monday I'm like, I painted over this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, take them off the website.
I love that, but I feel like it's so authentic to the like life as a full-time artist, because I love those, even the tricks you shared, like put gold leaf on it or frame it, or even seeing that final photograph and just sit with it for a second, because over time your maybe not so favorite painting becomes your favorite one once you sit on it. But sometimes the opposite problem happens too, where you're like, actually, this is gone. Sorry, it's erased from history now.
Yeah, like there'll be pieces of like a lot of times I'll just take a piece and I'm like, I love this. Like 65% of this is perfect, but this bottom part, like, I don't know, it's not solidified right. Something's wrong with it. And sometimes I'll just add a pinstripe of gold leaf or like just a line of some sort of like a white texture. Like that's what my new thing is, just kind of whiting out everything, starting over. Gold leaf is definitely one of my tricks. It's like when in doubt, put some gold leaf on it. And gold leaf is just incredible. I first experienced that medium working in the trade that I'm in. And I'm very, I could never repay decorative painting for all it taught me about mixing mediums. Before I started doing that work, I made collage, shadow box, spurry, tactile. I still have all the ingredients to make these pieces, but I haven't made them in years. Like once I started painting, I haven't really gone back. It's been about 20 years now that I've just been straight paint. But man, like, if I ever retired, I don't know, I might get back into collage work. That was how it started.
That's amazing. And for our listeners who may not know much about your journey, you've of course listed a lot of your experiences right there, but when did you first realize that you wanted to evolve your art and make it your full-time business? Or what were those career paths, the abridged version of how you got from making that decision to make your creative practice full-time and then where you are today and what that business looks like?
So the business, I pretty much I have a decorative painting company and I employ 15 artists, which is fucking phenomenal. Sorry, I cussed, but it's phenomenal. It makes me so proud. Like I love trying to take care of these artists because I'm lucky enough to employ people that have way different types of talent than me. Like incredible painters, and like I don't have drawing and painting skills like mural painting, but I employ some people who have those. And we're pretty much a collective at this point, but it really does give me a sense of satisfaction that I have somewhat of a business mind enough to realize that this particular trade, which is ancient, is an opportunity to make a living, and it's really sellable. And I feel very fortunate to be like a super creative. I mean, I really need to create. I really have all the quirks and kinks that you get when you can't get time to be in your studio and you can't get quiet time to just explore, your practice. I get really cranky. like I need a couple studio days, a week for sure. I don't get as much as I'd like, to be honest, because the business of art is just it's more exhausting than the business of making art. I mean, I can just get lost in my studio. You know how it is. You can your mind shuts off and you just start moving. And then there's that other brain that's like, it's a necessary evil. It's really kind of obnoxious. Like the business of art is kind of a pain in the ass, but it takes a certain brain. And I feel like when I get the business part done, then I get to reward myself with studio time. Then I'm like, okay, finally, all my artists are employed this week. Everybody's got work. All the jobs are packed for. And usually by the end of the week, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, those are my days to really be in my own space and create for myself. Once everybody else is taken care of, then I feel I can kind of like let go. So how I got into that, the business, the trade that I do is, it's afforded me to have, employment, income, but also be working with mediums that, are special. We use marble dust and marble plasters, and we use gold leaf and silver leaf. And oftentimes we're painting murals or signs. Faux finishing is also part of our trade, which is really, I mean, if you have to have like a really sharp and keen sense of color, and painting skills to be able to pull that stuff off and do it really well. And I'm so fortunate because we have a very good reputation. We've got a lot of business, and we've just steady grown, for the past few years. I never had this many people on staff. And so it's lucrative, and I'm in a very good position in Baltimore City that there's tons of talent here. Obviously there's tons of talent everywhere, but there just happens to be a really, really special group of people here that I'm fortunate enough to know and employ. And we live close to the District of Columbia and all the surrounding areas, which are just, ripe with new build, commercial spaces, and people that do value even if not a large scale painting in a lobby necessarily, or, the whole law firm, commissioning paintings. Those are things that have happened. But we sometimes are being asked to like create an amenity space where we're creating a wall to feel like limestone, because the real limestone was, $1 million. They only wanted to spend 8,000 or whatever. And so we get these opportunities to be creative and come up with finishes, which happens to feed really well into my own personal work. Because like I said, I don't know why I'm really like, I'm super responsible. It's very strange. Like I've got this like real regimented sense of like, I've got to get the work done and then I can play. And so the work oftentimes is ArtStar, which is my company. That's the work. And then like I'll be in, one of the series of paintings that I make is called the ArtStar series. And I literally make paintings out of my sample boards because they're fucking beautiful. They create these lines. I'm on ArtStar 86, I think. I made 86 of these paintings, and I've sold every one of them. They're freaking gorgeous. I'll work on this board for 5-6 months. Once the board feels finished, I'll take it down. I'll put a layer of matte medium on it. I'll sit with it for a while, and then I'll add things to it and kind of complete the process. Then I'll have it framed because it's on paper, and they're beautiful. And it's kind of an interesting thing that the business kind of starts the dictation of this piece, but then I get to finish it.
So, question that I have for you, Kelly, is how did you develop your unique style and technique? You touched upon doing the samples as you were trying to fit it in for commissions or, specific spaces and what the clients were requesting, but more in terms of your personal work and or how much of that personal style that you have comes across in your actual client work when you're doing it yourself.
Not usually. I mean, occasionally I get the client that's like, I want you to paint this wall however you want. I mean, that's my dream. That does not happen very often. And I get very frustrated because a lot of times I'm just trade, I just have the skill to do this type of wall finish very well. And like, that's stifling. I mean, it's a lot to navigate because, I'm like, God damn it, I could do so much more. Like, God, I wish you were braver, but I do have those clients. And like, all it takes is like the one client, right? And then you get the photos, and then as long as you can get the job done, get the photos, then you can sell it again. And so I often feel like a racehorse kind of, at the starting gate, the gates have opened and I'm just like, come on, and sometimes I get to really let go and run, but most of the time I'm kind of held back. And so, and while I'm doing what I'm doing, which, some of your questions about business will go into that, while I'm doing what I'm doing still to keep a roof over everyone's heads, sometimes Kelly Walker makes just as much money as ArtStar. Like this past weekend,
Nice.
Moved several large paintings, which was just really unexpected. And I'm very excited about, I mean, that just gives me such like, oh my God, like, yay, this work. Okay. I mean, I don't want to be insecure, but the when somebody buys your work and you're like, okay, I'm worthy. Like, this is worthy. They want to take it home. They want me to be in their life. And it feels very personal, much more than the other stuff I do.
Makes sense. I mean, healthy validation is a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and knowing that, I mean, it's also interesting because the other work that you're doing, while it may feel somewhat stifling to a certain extent, at least, and now this is like a philosophy I go with, it's like every brushstroke counts, essentially. So it still builds upon your muscle memory for your own personal work versus if you said your day job is accounting. Yeah,
right.
then that's, yeah. And it's like also in a way, the other jobs that you're doing can also help kind of promote your own personal work too, because you're also building that relationship with people. And say that person that you did the lobby of a hotel for, I'm making it up for a second. Well, someone in that lobby and that staff might say, actually, can you, like, I want a painting for my house. And I know that besides trade, you also do this other stuff too. And I want to support you and I love what you do. And like, it's still like, they're not exactly the same fields, but they are related fields, which I think is really nice. Like they're still adjacent to each other. So it's good to know that at least some of it can come through, sort
I
of.
thought a little more cross marketing between like the interior designers that I do work for and like my personal artwork. and there's only a few that are really like, ooh, and that's fine. Like that's actually really, that's been very rewarding because it's designers that I really, really respect and love what they're doing. So I'm like, yes, my work is like, thank you, like, and that's happened more and more this year. It's so hard. Like when you're first starting out, you know, I mean, I'm fortunate that I'm such an impatient person that I'm just like, okay, done next. Okay, done next. And like, then I'm like, nope, that one's not really done. Let's go back. And like, I'm very Warholian in that way. Like, I'll just keep working, and then we'll just decide if they like it, fine. While they're looking at it, I'm going to just keep making more stuff. Like I've and I need that outlet. I definitely approach my art practice kind of like a jock. Like I mean, I'm sweating. I'm sweaty. I'm stretching. Like I'm bending. I'm like, it gets pretty intense in there. Sometimes. I mean, sometimes I'm making my dahlia flowers, and I'm just like very still and standing in one place and just like very meditatively like applying this plaster in this really methodical, beautiful way. And other times I'm like all in it. It just depends. And I never really know what's going to show up when I go to work. I mean, certainly sometimes I'm like, I really want to finish this dahlia, or I really want to finish, this big American flag I've been working on. And I'll start that way, but I never really know how my energy is going to, finish for the day. Like, I just never really know what I'm going to get into.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that comparison that you made of like your creative practice, executing it like you're a jock, like you're an athlete. Cause I honestly talk about that all of the time. Like, I feel like there are so many parallels because as an athlete myself, I feel like oftentimes like an artist and an athlete aren't seen as like the same personality, but there's so many parallels. You have to show up like every single day, go to the gym, put in your reps, try different styles of workout. You may excel in one and not in the other. And also
Right.
learning like how to be uncomfortable. Like the creative practice isn't always this super therapeutic, calm, zen, energy flowing experiences. You have a great day one day, and the next day you're like, have I made art before? Because I can't do anything right now.
Right.
Like it is such a roller coaster journey. And so much of it is like being able to sit in that uncomfortable experience and push through it to overall make that progress. So I love that you
Yeah,
compared it that way.
that time under tension. That's how you make muscle.
Yeah.
That's how you make a savings account. Like it's so interesting because I would have never thought of myself as a disciplined person. And I'm not disciplined I'm very disciplined in a lot of ways, in a lot of ways that really do matter. But when it comes to like, there's a couple things that I've been a little lacking in my discipline in the past few months that I'm like, okay, it's time to rein it back in. It's time to get focused. Like I've been on the fat train, just really enjoying lots of sugar. And I'm like, I don't even like sugar. I gotta cut the sugar.
Your body's addicted at this point. I'm sorry to tell
It's
you.
totally addicted. It's totally addicted.
Yeah. But going back to like your creative practice, you actually have a studio in Baltimore City. So can you share more about your studio, when you moved into that studio, and how that space really impacts your creative energy or influences it?
Oh my God. I love my space. I'm so lucky that I got this building. I am so freaking blessed. Um, because I started working I started my company out of the backseat of a Nissan Maxima, 4-door sedan, with a ladder and some paint and some drops. And it's kind of and the same thing. Like, I lived in a house with, 5 bedrooms. It was a big old country, uninsulated house that I paid like 60 grand for in another part of Baltimore City. And when it was time, I was in there, I had like an office, I had 1 bedroom, and like everything else was covered in paintings, storage. I was taking photographs in the kitchen. Like it was a mess. And I remember my mom coming to visit, me being like, I feel like and I was looking to buy a building, thinking that I was going to buy like, a $20,000 shell, like some crappy building, and then just have my artwork in there as a studio, because I could not wrap my head around paying rent. Like paying rent just seemed, I mean, my mom's a real estate agent, so that just kind of has been bred in me that you buy something, and so I like was looking and looking and looking for buildings. And when this building came up, it was not on the market. It was a bank-owned foreclosure property. It had been abandoned for many years. It's an old warehouse, old body shop. It's the coolest freaking building. It's literally the artist's dream, this building. And I ended up making a cash offer, having an angel donor, one of my clients like was like, I'm going to give you some money. I'll help you with this. And you can, I had already done the paperwork to show what I was qualified to take a loan out for. And so what I was going to borrow from this person was, minimal compared to what I was, it was like $100,000 less. They knew I was good for it financially. They're like, I'll let you borrow this money. You can pay it back interest free. Like, it was cool. So they let me,
because banks don't always trust the artist's income. They're like, wait, what do you do? And you're like, I swear I'm good for it.
Yeah, it was a miracle. Seriously. It was like, no, we had a cash offer and it was like 3 different people bidding on this place. And we were able to get it because we came in with cash, and cash is the strongest offer. And we got it. And like, I was able to like move in here, and I literally spent every single dime I'd ever squirreled away, which I'd been saving and saving, thinking I was going to buy this house, some other building. And I ended up spending all my money and then some. And I was so terrified. I was so afraid of what was going to happen. But I moved into the building. I moved the business into the building. And now I've just bought another house. I'm finally going to move out of the studio. I have never not lived in my studio. So we'll see what that's like. But there's too many people that work here now. Like, it's a real business. Like, I'm like, well, I have to go, there's like, I have my little area to paint and the rest of it's business, but Kelly Walker's doing pretty well. Like, I'm doing a lot of like large scale commissions and having clients to the studio to buy paintings that are already made, and it's very much, I guess what I've learned in all these years is like, you have to spend the money first and then it comes back. It's just like the ocean, like the currency, it's like, I have to like push all my chips in first and then it comes out. Like, then it comes back. Every time I've hired another artist, I hired like 3 new people in the past 6 months. And I'm like, it's got to hurt. You have to like take the chance first. And then the business always comes. It's so weird. I've really started to trust the process of energy a little more. You probably are vibing on that too. I can see your face.
We definitely are. Plus, it's one of those things too, where, well, I have a couple things for you that just come to mind. One of the sayings I like is, discomfort is the currency of change. Love that. And I think it applies here very, very much so. The other thing that comes to mind, another saying, for the record, by the way, Kelly, you may not know this. I came from the corporate world, investment finance.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Not painting, not art. So I'm definitely like, I escaped the left brain universe to go right brain. But then the other thing that I'm thinking about with what you're saying is also, expansion requires delegation. And that was something that in my old corporate, world was something that was talked about a lot. You have to invest in the people that also help grow your business, because without them, you're limited to what your body, your mind, and your creative juice can do. And that's just one person's lifetime, as opposed to if you're also investing this money to help also other people, that instead of them having to get maybe not even an art related job, you're giving them that opportunity. So I know you mentioned earlier a comment about feeling like mama hen, I think is what you called it. And they're all your little chicks, but that's wonderful, because then it's like, it also gives you, if you have a day where you're like, nothing's working, it's also going to help you with the whole, like, no, I'm here for other people too. And accountability wise, there's other people that I'm looking out for. So I'm really glad you mentioned all those things. There is something I wanted to, before we move on to the next set of questions, something I wanted to ask about. And when we were talking about the journey, one thing that I'm curious about, you've been doing this for what, about 20 years, give or take? Not trying to date anybody, for the record, but
20 years.
How long has it been?
22.
Okay. So 2000. Wait, so straight out of high school, you went into the whole car things?
No.
Help us here. I'm trying to figure out the very origin story of how you were like, that's it, I'm painting. Like, did you do another job and they were like, no, this is not it, and then went into this?
It was a little more miraculous than that. I really can't explain it without saying that miracle kind of thing happened. I feel very cared for, energetically somehow. There's somebody pulling some strings for me, I think, for me to fall into, because I really truly fell into the work that I do. I was making work. I was making shadow boxes and weird diorama pieces. I was also making like lamps and like furry furniture. I always had kind of an interest in interior design, but I don't know why. I remember I read a lot, I would always like read about like, I don't know. I knew I was an artist. I was really grateful that when I found that out, it happened in Baltimore. I never even took an art class. Like my first art class I took in rehab. Like I just didn't do that. So I also didn't go to school. I stopped going to school in ninth grade. I just took off. I was much more interested in other things like, partying, hitchhiking, having adventures. And I ended up in Baltimore in 94 and I ended up getting sober here. And after I got sober, then I was like, well, now what? What am I going to do? I had no living skills. I had no education. And so I ended up working in warehouses and restaurants because you can do that. And I was really very good at working in fast paced physical environments. And I like, especially in the restaurant, I love food prep and I loved like making beautiful food and eating food. And I started to like learn a lot about the art of cooking. And then between warehouse work, restaurant work, I became a bike messenger. And that was also a really sexy, fun thing to do. And just great. I was so poor because I was a rookie bike messenger, but I rode my bike all day long, every day, and I was in great shape. And I delivered a package to a decorative painting company. So that is literally how it came about. Like the woman that owned the company was, and still is, like 5 feet tall. She's just this hot, she's super cute. And I was like, what's up? And I was like totally flirting with this woman. Like, who is this? What are you guys doing in there? And behind her was this awesome showroom, which looks a lot like my space now. Like the showroom, when you open the door into the vestibule, was all decorative painted and murals. And I was like, what are you guys doing here? And she said, we're a decorative painting company and, but you have to have a car, but we're hiring. And I was like, huh. And I came back a few weeks later and filled out an application and ended up getting a job with literally zero painting skills. But she liked my shadow boxes. And she, thought I was funny because I'm totally, she's flirting with her and she's very aware and like the attention. And we're very good friends. She's an incredible artist. Her name is Kim Manfredi. And you guys should look her up. She's incredible, mentor quality human. I just fell right into her lap essentially. And she gave me a job as an apprentice. And I worked for her for about 2 years. And then I decided to start my own thing. And I continued to subcontract for her. And she sold the business. And then I ended up going on my own for real. So in 2002 is when ArtStar was established. In 2005 is when I really started like hustling and trying to do and really try to make ArtStar a thing. And, it started out as me and one other girl. And now there's 15 of us. Just blows my mind.
That is absolutely incredible and such an inspiring story too. And congratulations on your journey of sobriety. That is not an easy feat and super, super powerful. And I've talked on the podcast previously and with people in my studio. There's actually a local recovery center that I partner with. So we host an annual event called the Art of Recovery. And so it's a huge celebration. It's a detox rehab center that's free to anyone in Wake County in North Carolina. Wow. Yeah. So they have a men's campus and a women's campus. We could talk all day about them, sing their praises. But they really value art in the journey of sobriety because there is so much that comes out of that experience. And really reconnecting with yourself, unpacking all of those themes. And so now we have one of their fundraising events. It's Art of Recovery. We have musicians and spoken word poetry by program participants and art displays. And it's a wonderful, wonderful event, but it really had opened my eyes so much having people in my life that are on various paths of sobriety themselves, of how powerful, of course, that journey is and how difficult it can be. So huge kudos to you there and how it really is one of those, it feels like a miracle moment of you delivered this package and then you're like, oh wait, this is where I was meant to be in this moment at this person's doorstep. And that's what really began. Yeah.
And I didn't even know I was an artist until I had 4 years sober. I had no idea. And it just came out, it bubbled up inside me. It was always there. I mean, looking back, I'm like, oh God. Yeah. I was an artist without an outlet. I've always been just like brimming over with creative ideas and I've got tons of ADD and tons of energy and like, this energy needs to be harnessed. And I used to like quiet it down with drugs and alcohol. And now I'm sober and it's just like, just like explodes out of me. And so like, I have to temper it because it can be very disruptive. I have to do a lot of things. I need to write, I need to pray and meditate. I need to do lots of things to like stay grounded. Acupuncture. Every time I go see an acupuncturist, they put like 500 needles in my feet. They're like, girl, you need to get on the ground. And that's the other thing. I mean, the business like tethers me to like, while I'm creatively making things, a lot of times I'm like, now I work hand in hand with a lot of designers, and most of the time they know what they want, or at least a color, like the wall that we referenced earlier that I made for the gallery show in Raleigh. I was trying to use colors that were in this space, and some of the colors that were in like the most complementary colors for Rosa's and I's work, which ended up being a pastel palette, because that was really a departure from the rest of the work, which I thought would like hold its own, be different but the same. And I remember Anna was like, "Do you want me to put?" I was like, "Put the name of the show and the artist on the wall." She's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Absolutely. You're not taking up wall space. Like, we're gonna hang paintings on those walls. We're not taking up another wall to put the signage up." So, but yeah, I mean,
Amazing.
it's a pretty cool life. I mean, you got to learn a lot about. I've had to learn a lot of technically, how much I can force a medium. And that's one of the other things I love about my personal practice is I can really get rebellious with the mediums I'm using, because I can get away with stuff on the canvas that I can't, in somebody's house. Like today I accidentally mixed oil and acrylic, and I thought this glaze was acrylic and it was actually oil, and I put them together and they did that reaction, which is lovely. And I do that on purpose a lot. There's a lot of things I do in my personal practice that's like just weird, just weird combinations of things. It feels very much like cooking also.
You have to know the rules to break the rules.
That's right.
Intentionally break the rules.
That's right.
Yep.
I know that when I mix like oils and acrylics, or if I do layers and layers of pours, that I need to seal the canvas with some sort of resin. Usually I don't do that to all my paintings, but the ones that I've like done weird shit to, like I need to encapsulate it to keep it from dripping off of somebody's wall in 10 years.
Yeah, you get that phone call of, my painting just peeled itself off the canvas and the floor.
Right.
Yeah, but you've been in business this long, and I'm sure you haven't gotten that call, so you're safe. You're good. You're good. Yeah, no, that's all good. Well, I love that you made that comparison to cooking. That's one that I share a lot, especially with newbie artists that are like, my life's over, that painting didn't work out. And I'm like, first time you cook a lasagna, it's not going to be great. And you don't give up on cooking forever just because one recipe didn't turn out. You try it again. Like painting is the same way. So I love that you said that. And then also that you're still giving yourself permission to experiment, which is something I was going to like ask you, and I was going to be curious about as you talked about the business side. We've interviewed a lot of artists and different creative professionals, and sometimes the answer that comes up is the more they're focused on the business side, the less they have for their own personal work. So I love to hear that you're still giving that a priority, because it also feeds you back into ideas and different things you can do for your other professional work. So they're basically on a loop of sorts, which is amazing. And then of course, like Jackie said, congrats on breaking the cycle and then getting, the sobriety cycle. So that is amazing. I love how you fell into your basically your calling, and the part that you said too. I have so many follow-ups, but anyways, I'm going to try to keep it short. The other part that you said too, of you were trying to mute things down. I completely relate to that. Although the way the things I used were slightly different. Mine was more escapism, if you will, with video games. But back in the day, but it was a way I didn't know how to handle ADHD. And like yourself, I'm always bursting and overflowing with ideas, and my brain's going 500 miles an hour, and I'm always piling 500 million things onto my plate. Truth. Jackie's my witness. She knows. And it was really, really hard to just get a handle on it. But I heard this in another podcast. They said, that's not your weakness. That's actually your superpower. You just have to learn to
power.
Yeah, they're like, learn to harness the madness. I was like, oh, I need to tattoo that on my body. Harness the madness. It's amazing. So I'm glad that you're mentioning all these things, because with our listeners, they come from all kinds of different backgrounds and or personal situations and or neurodivergent possibly as well. And it can feel sometimes very isolating of, am I going insane? Like I'm trying to wrangle all these different things and also run a business, a creative business. And how do I make this happen? So thank you for sharing that. That's not necessarily an easy thing to share. And really, really appreciate how you're being candid with us and kind of sharing some of that behind the scenes. But I do want to get us talking about some of the other businessy details. And one of the questions that I have is, if you're okay with it, of course, is you have a lot of different creative outlets. And I know based on our conversation, yes, a lot of them have to do with money, although experimenting doesn't necessarily, but could, depending if it works. But can you share with us your main income streams and how they've evolved over your career?
Main income streams is ArtStar for sure. Although I'm almost paying my personal salary with painting sales. But I still am not in a position to like transition out yet. Although that's my goal. Obviously my body is like, okay, can we not plaster any more ceilings? Like my body is literally falling apart. But it's not just me. If I only had to pay for myself, I might be able to pull it off. But I like framing. I like to be current on my taxes. I like to have plenty of canvas at my disposal at all times. I spend a lot of money on my personal practice. It pays for itself at this point, which is freaking awesome. And the hope is that it'll continue, that I'll, somebody will find, I'll continue to do what I'm doing now and just continue to make money from that. My business, definitely pays the bills still. But each time there's crossover between, the two worlds, it feels really right. And it's really exciting, to be a part of people's, collections and to be collected by people that have serious collections. That's starting to happen more and more. So I'm like, okay, this is the fruits of the labor, starting to come to fruition. Today I still had the client that, took 3 paintings to their house to live with to decide if they wanted to buy them and brought them all back today and barely wrapped them when I sent them out of the studio wrapped and they brought them back. I'm like, what? Gross. I hate that shit. That's really hard. Guys, what do you mean you're going to bring them back? Nobody that's so lame. So
it's always that roller coaster, right? And I'm sure there's ebbs and flows of whether they're weeks or days or months even. Okay, this is a more ArtStar heavy time versus a slow period there, so you can invest more into your personal work. It's almost that ebb and flow that over time they kind of lean into each other. But I think that's a great point that you brought up of, even if technically at points you could manage income wise just on your your personal artwork, there is also something that potentially could shift if you're like, I have to sell this number of paintings in order to make X income with your creative energy, or that little buffer, as you were saying, of, well, I'd love to have this many rolls of canvas or this many stretch canvases at one time, just as inventory for when the inspiration strikes and I can get 3 big canvases down. That may be something that, you'll have to hesitate on a little if the finances were a little bit tighter. And so you're almost leaving that buffer room of freedom, so you won't be put in positions to have to make that choice quite yet, at least.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. And with all these, of course, we've talked a lot about with ArtStar and your paintings yourself. A lot of it has to do with building relationships with, I'm sure, word of mouth from business project to business project, or meeting people through that for people that become future collectors. But how do you seek out business opportunities specifically?
I'm pretty fortunate now that I'm literally still getting business from work that I did 15 years ago. I know, cold calling the design firm and saying, can I please get in front of you and show you my wares? I made a really hard decision in 2008 that, involved, taking a chance with a very big designer, knowing that it was going to be the end of a relationship I had with another person. He saw my stuff and he wanted this particular finish that I really invented, that I know of. I don't know. I've never seen it since. in his house, and I called them like, hey, what do you got? When Kim sold the business, she sold it to two people that were really kind of dim-witted, and nobody liked them. And I'm like, I was still getting some work from them, and I called him up and I'm like, how do you mean to handle this? Like, he saw my work. My girlfriend's the art teacher at this place, and it was a fundraiser, and he saw my finish, and I want to do it, but like, how do you want me to bill for it? Do you want to pay me for it? Like I tried to be as above board as possible, and they just never called me back. And so I ended up like burning the bridge with them, which is not what I intended. I really didn't want to go out on my own as far as I had to go, but I was not going to pass this opportunity to work with this guy. And he really freaking made me, for sure. This guy made me, like, and anybody knows, if you can do this guy's work, and if you can turn out a product that's caliber of his work, you're in. And that's what did it. And I didn't see it at the time, but I knew it was hot. I knew it was something hot that I needed to follow up on. And the interesting thing is, when he developed a relationship with my old boss, I had put one of my lamps into an auction at Maryland Art Place. And I was making, weird furniture and weird lamps and stuff. And I made this lamp out of candy corn, and like sewed this really like fuzzy, furry lampshade. And it turned out that he won the lamp. He bid on it all night, him and this other architect that I also do work with now. But we're bidding again. And I didn't know who these people were, because I didn't care, because it wasn't my business. And I wasn't thinking on those terms. But I remember somebody being like, this is a big deal. This guy like bought these two hotshot architects were like bidding on your shit. And I'm like, I don't care. Well, when I go to interview with him all these years later, there's the lamp. I'm like, I made that. I'm like, and
talk about like a mic drop at the beginning of an interview. Be like, oh, by the way, you're already a collector of mine. He's like, what? Okay, great.
Yep. Yep.
That's amazing.
That is so cool.
Him, like, is cold calling this guy and like sending him a letter and gluing a piece of candy corn onto the stationery and being like, we employ that artist. So it's looking back, I could see that like everything was aligning to be right where I am now. It was all in alignment. So how else drum up new work? I mean, Instagram is a great tool. I get a lot of business from Instagram. I've grown my platform that way, for sure. I'll occasionally like pay for a promotion, like pay to bump up, let more people see it. And I get I'll end up getting a couple thousand followers sometimes from it. But it's so interesting, because ArtStar is really a collective of artists. And like, while I'm the one that kind of makes sure we have the work and the money in the bank to pay them all and keep the payroll running while we're waiting on the checks, like, I'm that person, making sure they have the paint, making sure they know what they're doing, doing the samples, doing the sales, like doing all that stuff. If it wasn't for the other artists that they're true, they are art stars, all of them. We would not be able to be this like this big and this available, to take on big projects. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's definitely a multi-pronged approach, as they say out there. There's a lot that you have mentioned that in my brain, I'm like, I have to ask you, how do you stay organized? I mean, events, opportunities, exhibitions, staying in contact with those same folks you were talking about, which I imagine you have their emails probably. But how do you keep it all organized? And you mentioned you have help now, but you mentioned too, you're handling a lot of that yourself too. So how do you keep a tap on these things?
I make a lot. I make a lot of lists, and I try really hard to stay in the day, like, okay, in the day that I'm in, Tuesday, the 17th, I just have to do these things, because I can like trip myself out and get full of anxiety thinking about next week or the end of the month, or, this weekend, or, is this going to be dry enough for me to do the next layer, for me to wrap it up, for me to take the painting? I get all like heady, and I'm like, nope, you just do the best you can in this day. And then you move on to the next day and you do the best you can that day. And all the days turn into like productive experiences. But if I didn't make lists, I would be so screwed. Like, you see this? Here's my list for the day. I go through probably 5 of these a year. I used to have a skinny one. It just wasn't enough. I need both ones. I also have a color coordinated old school calendar, that like that I highlight the things in my calendar based on, I have my own little code. Like, pink is workout, orange is a certain responsibility, yellow is a personal thing, green is work, and I can just look at my month and see that I'm like way too green heavy. Like I'm doing way too much work, that my yellow, which is personal, are like pre-construction meetings about the house. Like that's not a personal thing,
Good quality time, you know?
you gotta have nap,
Balance.
gotta and every once in a while.
Yeah. the
Yeah, so it's
balance we
almost
all
that
seek.
it's almost that high level of time tracking in a way of understanding you need a balance of all those different segments in order to stay balanced, both
Right.
physically and mentally. And
That's right.
especially for you, as you mentioned, having your personal studio and your business studio, and currently where you're living and spending most of your time all in the same building, I'm sure
Right.
having that physical calendar is good.
Yeah, and we have projections for the business too, of like, the next we have 4 months of calendars up where you can kind of see like some of the big projects, and then so that people can come in, the artists can come in and glance over and be like, wow, we've got lots of work. And they don't have to think about it, Like I want them to feel safe so they can do their own fucking work. Honestly, like I want them to be able to like, go sew their stuff, or like, make their portraits, or, have their side hustles or whatever they're doing. Like I want them to have time and be, I don't know. I never thought I wanted to be a mother, but I definitely have some motherly instincts when it comes to like caring for the people. But that's how I love, that's how I'm like, hey, you're taking care of me, I'm going to take care of you. Let's make sure, this big chunk of your stress is covered. You got income, you have a job. All you have
That's
to do
your
is show
love
up.
language.
Yeah, it is.
Taking care of others. I love it. Well, I have a follow-up question. So obviously the moment you start taking more than just one assistant and now you have several people, I mean, we talked about how you stay organized. How do you keep them organized? Like, do you have a big calendar for them too? To be able to like, so and so I need you to do this part, so and so I need you to do this part, so and so, or do you have like something digital where you can assign tasks
We're
and they can just
so bad
see
at
it?
digital. Oh my God, I'm so bad at digital. Like, I'm just like, we keep trying to like move into a digital calendar, and it changes. It'll change on a Sunday, and I'll have to erase shit. At least I figured out how to do it in pencil. And like, then my girlfriend has to like polish it up before we send it out in her handwriting, because you can actually read her handwriting, but and then making changes, like, one job just canceled at the last minute, like 10:30 at night on a Wednesday. We're supposed to be there on Thursday. I'm like, oh, great. Now I have 5 people to find work for. Like that kind of stupid nonsense.
Hopefully the contract covers if you cancel within a very short amount of time. We're charging you anyways.
I mean, they're like the kind of crazy shit. Like this guy calls me, he's like, hey, listen, we're like $500,000 over budget. We're going to have to eliminate the floor painting. I'm like, dude, we've already spent your deposit. We have everything ready to go. We're just waiting for you to get out of the way so we can paint it. Like, what do you want me to do? I mean, I'll walk away from the second half, but like, what's another 20 grand?
Right.
You already spent money.
Like, give me a break, dude.
Right. This multi-million-dollar building, I think like this isn't going to be the make or break. And if it is, they have bigger problems.
Yes, they do.
So, having that kind of, I don't know, a little bit of leverage, like, come on. I was going to digress into a whole nother world, but like I'm really kind of into business. I like reading. Like I subscribe to the Be More Art magazine and the Baltimore Business Journal. Like that's pretty much all I read. And on LinkedIn, I'm just like constantly deep diving, and I'm like checking out what's happening in Maryland politics. What developers are here, what parts of town are getting developed, what are they putting in? Just curious, because not that I necessarily get work directly from those places, but oftentimes we get a little something. And if I know one of the players that are part of the development, sometimes I'll know hey, is there anything for us? Can we help you in that project?
It's all about who you know. Literally, it all boils down to relationship building. This is something we like to talk about on the podcast and with other artists too. It's like you making like art in the basement of your parents' home you can have the next masterpiece. And if nobody knows about it, good luck. Like, what are you going to be discovered after you've passed away? Like, come on.
And then goofy about, like you don't have to be like, I know a lot of people, and like, I'm just so excited when stuff like, I don't know. I just like I like to either be a part of it or to know they're doing well. Like, I don't like that pushy stereotype. Like I'm not
it's also that abundance mindset too, of like other artists succeeding. Like like a high tide lifts all ships mindset. And so that's one thing that we talk about too a lot, is like that community over competition mindset. Like we all are rising together. And if a developer investing in a mural in their building, like with another Baltimore artist, that's a mutual win for both of you, because it's showing that murals and original art in corporate America are valued. Like industry wide, that's a win. People are having that experience, which means they want to keep doing more murals in corporate spaces. One of them might be from you, one of them might be from someone else. And so it really leans into that mindset of just not seeing people as competition, but then also you never know what weird connections you may build with artists from other states who happen to be from Baltimore, or a developer that also knows someone from this community organization that you are a part of. Like there's definitely Smaltimore, or the small world is a true thing. And it is truly abundant in that way, which I think kind of taking us towards the end of reflecting more on your journey as an artist in general. There's so many joys to it. And there's especially hearing your origin story of how you came across your creative practice. How do you define success as an artist?
Am I proud of the body of work? Because I've always worked in series, and like a couple years ago, I made it like a certainty that I really wanted to develop each series further on purpose. Like I wanted to make 15 dahlia flowers. I wanted to make X amount of large scale paintings over 6 feet. But, like I had a couple goals, which is, and to be proud of all the work that I have. I made a brochure, which took a lot of energy, a ton of energy to like, be like, hey, here's my collections. I have like 5 distinct energies that come out of me. And I've pretty much been able to contain them into those 5 and not go rogue anywhere else. Right. I'm just like keeping them here. I'm going to stay with, cause I had and being proud, having a full body of work from each series and feeling like, wow, I did that. Like I set out, I had a goal and I did that. Having a museum show would be a successful venture for me. I feel like that would be some icing on the cake. My collector base expanding, I've got I've had some pretty cool collectors over the years, but like continuing to collect, I have my eye on a couple other things. I've always wanted to show at Art Basel. I've always wanted to be in that sect. I've been watching Brandon Clark, who's an artist you might be following online. He's just kicking ass. I just love seeing self-taught people succeed in that world, because I was really under the impression that I would never make it in the art world because I work in series, because I'm self-taught. And I've been told that, by people that were, retired from MICA, that were high up, like professors are like, oh yeah, you're never going to make it in the art world. You work, you're too all over the place. And then I'm seeing people that are like, well, actually, F that, like people are thinking bigger than that these days. You don't have to only paint portraits. Like sometimes I play with landscape painting. It just makes me really calm. I like to go on a vacation and take beautiful photos and then come in my studio and paint them. And it's, people always buy them. It's weird. I don't even mean to show them or sell them, but
I don't think it's weird though. I think it's authentic, and that's what people are connecting to, especially if you're making them without the pressure of sales and you're just doing it for you. There's like that idea of making it so vulnerable, it's universal. Like if that's what you're expressing through the paintings, people resonate with that. It's almost, I like to think of, besides the cooking, I love analogies, so now that you can't tell, but besides the cooking analogy, I like to think of art as its own language. And as artists, we each have our own. And sometimes people can read what's on that canvas, even if it's absolutely abstract. And they're like, this reminds me of XYZ. And sometimes it's something random that you're like, okay, you do boo. If you buy it, it's whatever you see in it. And sometimes it's like, how'd you know that that's what I was trying to convey through the painting? Like, that's what? Like, it's fully abstract. And other than some maybe very specific cues like red equals rage or anything. But I'm like, you can have 2 paintings that look identical, same colors, and then somebody will read like that one. It seemed like you were going through a tough time and maybe like light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, how? Like anyways, I think I don't know. Art is magic. Let's just go with that. But I did want to ask you, based on what you just shared, I love that idea that you said you had to overcome, which I feel that way too. Again, I didn't come from art school. I came from business school. So I also had that mindset of maybe I can't be a successful real artist because I came from the other side of the tracks, so to speak. And I didn't have that classical training. And honestly, luckily, the three of us live in a day and age where it doesn't really matter that much. And anybody that's still like sticking to those rules, they can, pardon my French, they can stuff it. Because it doesn't matter as long as it's real what you are portraying. We're not saying every stick figure is valued in the millions, like that's not it. But it's like if you're putting in the work, the skill, the sweat, the blood, the tears, all the things into it, there's a chance somebody on this lovely earth is going to resonate with it. That's what matters. I mean, it's not just, is it fancy schmancy white wall galleries down in Miami or New York or wherever it is. So, but you've actually gotten to some of those, so that's still cool too. Question for you. What is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey, before that fateful bicycle ride into the art decorators place, or maybe once you got started and you decided to give this career a spin?
I would probably tell myself that it takes what it takes and to trust the process. Just give myself a break. Be nice to myself. That's my new, pretty much my new mantra.
Be a good boss to yourself.
Yeah, just be nice, man. Like I used to get in the studio and my brain would just be thinking, like just torturing myself mentally with, who am I kidding? This is fucking terrible. Like, stop trying. Like, and it was like I had to just kind of exercise my demons, like it's funny, like exercising is one of those ways that I feel like I get rid of my demons and they build up. Today I took a walk outside. Beautiful here. It's 47 degrees, beautiful day. I took a walk and I walked to the pharmacy and back, made my girlfriend go with me, which she's always grumpy, never wants to do anything, but I made her go and we were laughing and having a good time, after going out. And I'm like, God, it's so important to like slow down and savor, just, walking on the street and feeling my perspective change, because that's what we're doing is my perspective changes and it gets harmonious. I get back in tune with like, I guess my God place or some quiet, like still innocent and powerful place in me when I'm creating. And, I find that in a bunch of different outlets, exercise being one of them. It's funny because they're all ways to kind of get your demons out, all my little practices. And like, I've been able to make friends with my demons for the most part. I've been able to kind of observe them and let them go by, let them show up.
Yeah.
And, not even, they don't have to torture me and burden me anymore. I used to really believe what my brain told me.
Yeah. Thoughts are not facts.
It was really just terrible,
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for my art practice because it probably kept me alive. It definitely kept me sober. It kept me doing something to find that peace. And now it's a totally different, it's not such a tortured experience. That's what happens. They say after 10,000 hours, you become a master.
Yep.
And it feels like, I know I'm, now I've had plenty of happy accidents and then figure out how to make those happy accidents again. And then try and again and being like, oh my God, I know how to do this now. Like I can make that weird chemical reaction happen when I do these 4 things.
Yes.
Like, word, that's my thing.
One question we like to ask all our guests is if someone just hands you $100, what would you splurge it on or invest it in? It has to be something that brings you joy and relates to your art or business.
I mean, my first thought is like, taking somebody out to dinner that I've been wanting to, hang out with or talk to or brainstorm with, like making that date happen. Hey, I got this $100. Like, let's go have drinks. Let's go have snacks. Let's go talk. Let's go spend a couple hours or an hour or whatever it is. That's kind of I think that's my first thought.
I love that. Classic business brain. You're like, go out, network, have a memorable experience, slow down a little bit, build that true connection. That's a great answer. And I don't think we've heard that one yet. So that's awesome.
Oh, good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Real quick before we go, how can listeners stay in touch with you after they listen to today's podcast episode?
Well, I am an avid Instagrammer. That's probably my favorite way to be in touch. My Instagram is Kelly_L_Walker. That is my personal practice, and ArtStar Baltimore is my professional practice, my other professional practice, the trade type work. And where else? Website, kellywalkerfineart.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll be
hopefully a gallery near you.
perfect. Well, we'll be sure to link all of those things in the show notes for this episode. And Kelly, would you mind staying with us a few extra minutes so we can discuss some strategies for cultivating a collector base on a bonus segment for podcast supporters?
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Awesome. So for our listeners, if you want to come become a supporter, head on over to levelupartist.com where you find how you can support the Level Up podcast.
And if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share what you have learned, you can follow us on social media. I'm at May Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artists on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.